Hello everybody, and welcome to my guide on Zyra for the support lane. Now, the reason I want to differentiate this is because the build is going to be very different for a Zyra support and a Zyra mid lane just due to the limited amount of resources that are available to you in the support role. So I might be making a guide on the mid lane for Zyra, but that will come at a later date. Now let's dive right into my Zyra experience. I have over 200,000 mastery points on her. Currently sitting at around 65% win rate with her. She's definitely my go-to support for when I am auto-filled, and she works perfectly for anyone who is a mage player in the mid lane, and always serves as just a very good way to carry yourself out of say low elo. You just got done with your placements for the season. It's a great way to carry when you're out of that support role. Alright, and let's dive right into Zyra's kit. Starting off with her passive, Garden of Thorns. Seeds spawn around Zyra periodically, becoming faster with level and lasting 30 seconds. If an enemy champion steps on a seed, it dies. Zyra can cast spells near seeds to grow plants. Extra plants striking the same target deal reduced damage. Alright, so a couple just pointers, basic pointers we can go over with her passive is it is a great way to give your jungle a really strong leash and just get them that little bit ahead in the early game, because your plants just do massive amounts of damage to those minions and the big monsters. So always make sure to get a couple set up before the game starts. And also, just side note is they do not spawn when you are in the bush, so make sure that you are out of the bushes when you want them to spawn. Now this is where a lot of your poke comes from. This is where a lot of your damage comes from. Your other basic abilities spawn the plants, so you really need to be careful on which plant you want. The Q giving you a long distance shooting plant, and the E giving you a short distance but a very good slow on each of the plant attacks that can be very effective in peeling for your team in the team fights. So if you have a very fed AD carry that you need to protect, make sure that you are putting some plants down around him that are going to give him a slow zone around him, just so he can kite out those tanks and divers a little bit better. Alright, and going into the Q, we have Deadly Spines. Thick vines spread through the ground and explode into spines, dealing magic damage to enemies within the area. If cast near a seed, Deadly Spines grow a thorn spitter plant which fires at enemies from afar. Now this is a great way to poke out ADCs in the laning phase. Sometimes when I feel like I'm not going to be able to get an all-in at level 2, I just do WQ as my first two abilities, just so I can get that extra bit of poke with these on it. Now the plants will only aggro on the closest enemy, but a way around that is if you're one, attacking the enemy, your plant will attack it if it's in range, and two, if your ability both clips the plant's spawn range and the enemy champion. So be cognizant of that and make sure to hit that Q while spawning a W plant as well. Alright, at Rampant Growth, your W, Zyra plants a seed lasting up to 60 seconds. Deadly Spines and Grasping Roots cast near seeds will turn them into plants who will fight for Zyra. Zyra can store multiple seeds at once, and killing enemies reduce Rampant Growth's recharge time. Now this was a little bit of a buff when they changed the W for lane Zyra, but don't have to get into that since we're not really killing any enemies when we are in the support. So just make sure that your W is the first ability that you are using when you are trying a combo, just so you can make sure you actually spawn the plants, because the last thing you want to do is use your Q and E and be like, oh shit, I still have my W up. So always make sure that that is either the first part of your combo or the second, just depending on what kind of plant you want. And you have to be very careful about placement, because this is, I would say, around 60% of your damage from plants, so you cannot get them stepped on. So make sure that you're either casting an ability right after it, or it's not in an area where they are going to stomp out your plants. Alright, and going right into Zyra's E, Grasping Roots, Zyra sends forth vines through the enemies to ensnare her target, dealing damage and rooting enemies they come across. If cast near a seed, Grasping Root grows a vine lasher whose short-range attacks reduce enemies' movement speed. Now this is all your peel, is this E, outside of your ult, so you have to be very careful on when you're using it in a team fight, because it has I think around a double the amount of cooldown time as your Q, so just make sure you're using this as either if you're catching a couple and just doing an all-in with all your abilities QER, or you're saving it for those divers on your ADC. It's just kind of a play style preference. I usually am just going for all-ins unless my ADC is really carried, then I focus, or my ADC is very fed, then I focus more on peel. But usually if I'm trying to carry, I'm just throwing everything in on their back line to do as much damage as possible. Alright, and finally, let's get right into her ult, Stranglethorns. Zyra summons a Twisted Thicket at her target location, dealing damage to enemies as it expands and knocks the enemy airborne as it contracts. Now, this enrages your plants, dealing massive amounts of damage in your team fights, and is a very, very strong AoE ult that all mage supports really need. So it has a relatively long cooldown, so you have to be very careful on when you use it. It is kind of all your burst. It is extremely strong at level 6, giving you the plant buff and just its base damage, so you can really look for those level 6 all-ins in lane, and just there's really no way to answer back outside of a brand ult is going to do similar damage. But if you're in a 2v2 lane at about equal experience, equal items, you're always going to win with your ult, because the amount of damage is just it is really insane. So just make sure you're landing it, make sure you're hitting someone with your E before you ult, just so they have to stick in that zone longer with those enraged plants that are going to deal massive amounts of damage. Alright, and we are stepping into Zyra's runes now. First off, I like to say I'm a true believer in only doing either inspiration or sorcery as your primary. I'm sure some people have had success with electrocute, but it's just a little bit harder to proc than what it used to be, just because your plants aren't counting as individual hits. So let's get into it. First up is inspiration with Unsealed Spellbook. Is very good because it can give her more of those flash, ignite, engages in bot lane, cheesing out those early kills that you really need on Zyra to justify the pick and snowball your ADC, making him stronger and your enemy ADC a lot weaker. Now, this is a very strong keystone because you can change it later to an exhaust if they have a strong fed diver to give more peel. And you can also change it to teleport if you want to do some of those mid lane fancy switch over to teleport ganks for your mid laner to get him a little bit more fed. Some of the really good minor runes down this passage are Perfect Timing is a pretty good one if you're facing people with high impact ults such as Fizz, such as Talon, such as Zed. This could be a good pickup just to kind of not let them snowball it like they really want to. Another one down that line is the magical footwear, just giving her a little bit more of that movement speed and helping her get to that spell pen a little bit earlier, giving her that 300 gold cost reduction on the sorcerer's boots. Another decent rune down that line is the Cosmic Insight, just because it goes well with the Unsealed Spellbook. CDR is decent on Zyra. I wouldn't say it's amazing, like you should be always maxing your CDR, but it is a decent stat. Another one that's down that tree is the Biscuit Delivery, just because Zyra is kind of squishy in lane, so it's nice to kind of get that extra bit of sustain if you really need it. Say you're against a Vel'Koz or a Bran lane, or maybe a Karma that's really good at hitting her Qs. It can be a little tough. Alright, if the Unsealed Spellbook isn't really isn't really your cup of tea, Sorcery can add a little bit more damage and can be very strong. This is one that I've been experimenting most with Kind of early season, I was screwing around with Inspiration, but after the nerf on Unsealed Spellbook, I've kind of swapped over to Sorcery. Summoner Aerie is very strong, especially against tank supports that you're just constantly getting auto pokes on that can add that little bit more damage and that little bit more just that burst that you need to get a little bit more kills. Comet's also very good if you're hitting your E's a lot, and it guarantees that Comet proc. Now, it's really important, this first line, in my opinion. You really need to take the Mana Flow ban, just because the meta builds, they don't really run any mana items, so you are very mana starved, especially with your expensive kit. Both spells costing around 70, it scales a bit, and then your alt costing 100, so that's 30 your mana pool in one rotation, so you got to be really careful with your mana usage. A Mana Flow ban just makes that a little bit easier to deal with. I'd say Transcendence or the Adaptive Focus is the best if you're... I usually go with the Transcendence just to get that little bit of that 10% CDR. Is very nice, very cheap. Zyra doesn't have the best AP scalings for the adaptive AP that you can get from that Roja, so I just kind of weighed the pros and cons, and I found more success with the Transcendence. And finally, I'm a big proponent of Scorch on the Sorcery line, just because the Gathering Storm isn't really what you're looking to do. You already have enough damage in that late game, but you really need to get those kills early in Scorch, so it just helps you a little bit more in your stronger area, as opposed to, or it helps you a little bit more in the weaker areas, as opposed to helping you more when you're super strong already in the late game, when you are already one-shotting the carries in the back line. Alright, and a couple other choices for your secondary. Precision can be pretty good with Cut Down, or with Coup de Grace is a very strong, just giving you that little bit more damage. Triumph is pretty good, just good overall, give you a little bit extra health because you're kind of squishy, and you're usually going to be one-shotting someone out, so you're almost guaranteed every team fight to be getting that proc of extra health. Domination can also be a very good secondary rune setup with Cheap Shot proccing off of your E, and Zombie Ward giving you a little bit more vision control, because after all, you are a support. Even though you are mostly there for damage, the vision game is extremely important, especially now that they have taken out the Tracker's Knife. Now, the final rune set, Resolve, is a very niche case that I would ever even consider this, let alone take it. I would say they would have to have a lot of divers, would be one condition. They would have to have something like a Draven that I really cannot let get kills on me early game, and then something like Alistair. So the only time I would consider this Resolve rune set on Zyra is if it's a support like Leona or Alistair, a really good early game ADC like Varus or Draven, then a diver out of the jungle like Rengar, and then a mid lane assassin such as Fizz, such as Katarina, just to give you that little bit more protection with the bone plating. It can really save lives. Alright, and that will do it for the runes. Alright, and on to Zyra's items. Now, I am a huge proponent of Spell Pen on Zyra. I think it is the single most important stat that she can get in-game. I am always rushing Sorcerer's Boots and Oblivion Orb. So the reason why I do this is she has very high base damages and pretty poor AP scaling. So what you want to do to maximize your amount of damage you can do to people and the impact overall in the game is to rush that Spell Pen. Now, it is a very optional pick to finish that Oblivion Orb before going into your core items. The only time I would say Gomer Nomicon before going into your core is if they have a, let's say, Vladimir mid lane, a Warwick out of the jungle, and a Soraka support. I'd say that it's definitely worth it to go into that before your two core items. Now, talking about the core items, they are super impactful with the plants. The reason why I think Zyra is such a strong pick right now and we've all seen the one clip of people getting soloed by plants, is the Rylai's slow on each one of your plant's attacks is super effective. And then the Liandry's burn is a very good tool just to make those plants a bit more punishing and giving you that increased damage. On to the next row, we have Void Staff, which is very good spell pen. It is I'd definitely say a must buy if they are purchasing a lot of magic resist against you guys. And Rabadon's is it's not the best, but it was recently buffed, giving you a little bit more AP scaling. But this is definitely like the last item of your build. You shouldn't be building this before either of the core items or before your spell pen. This is a super late game. Only if, like I would say, only your last item you should be looking at Rabadon's. Next up in that damage row is Luden's Echo. I would say you could get this after your 2 core items if you are snowballing. It is a very strong item in the current meta, giving you a little bit more of that burst that Zyra just loves and thrives off of. So if you're doing really well, you got a lot of extra gold, you don't want to go into your Void Staff, you just want to carry the game, you want to end it now, you guys have the Rift Herald and you're just pushing them down, Luden's can give you that little bit of extra damage, that little bit more poke to just finish off the game. Now, a couple very fun situational items I love to put in here with Zyra that I have personally a lot of fun with is first the GLP. Now, this can make your all-in, your combo so much stronger. It pretty much guarantees your root to hit. It adds a good chunk of damage. It gives you a little bit of cooldown reduction. It gives you good AP scalings, and it can often be the difference between an extra hit from one of your enraged plants that can make all the difference in a team fight. Another fun situational item that I would only recommend if you're snowballing and having fun and kind of want to try it out is the Spellbinder's Orb, which is very good to pop right before you throw in all your spells at once when you're trying to catch someone. So it'd just be Spellbinder's Orb, then E, then W, W, Q, R would usually be the combo. And last up for situational items would be Zhonya's. It is a pretty good item if you are going up against people with high impact ults and they seem to be focusing you because Zyra does massive amounts of damage. It can be a great pickup. Alright, and now on to the Zyra matchups that you will be seeing in the support role. First, let's go over the pick supports. I would say definitely the most interesting lanes for Zyra. 3 examples here would be Blitzcrank, Thresh, and Leona. Now, these are very interesting because it's a very cooldown reliant lane. Now, being Zyra, you are very capable of punishing enemy laners, especially melee range tanks. But being super squishy and not mobile at all, you're very susceptible to being punished. So what you need to do is work around their cooldowns. So the Blitzcrank has a pretty long cooldown on his Q, same with Thresh's hook in the early game, and a relatively mid-range cooldown for Leona's Zenith Blade. So what you want to do is always level 1 you want to be punishing them with auto attacks, just because you have a very long range, and just kind of abusing them, poking them down, and discouraging that all-in that they want to do on you, definitely. So just be careful, always stay behind minions, like just classic playing against the Blitzcrank lane. So once they use their cooldowns, if they miss, you just instantly go into punishing mode. You throw in auto attacks from a long range at the ADC, at the support, anyone you can, just to fully take advantage of that window that them missing their skill shots give you. Now, if you're not punishing in this window, it leaves you very susceptible to first ganks, second their cooldowns are going to come up again and they're going to have full health and they're just going to keep looking to do that to you. But if you're punishing them in those windows, you're pushing them back, you're denying a bit of farm on their ADC and pushing them in. It takes away their kit and it makes your kit a lot stronger. You're going to be safely poking from lanes with W and QE. So this is a very, can be
extremely easy lane or a very, very tough lane. So just be very cognizant of how volatile these lane matchups can be, and really I would be careful taking Zyra into these matchups. Now on to tank supports, a little bit more forgiving than the pick supports. For an example would be Braum, Tahm Kench, and Alistar. Same kind of deal with the pick supports. If Braum uses his Q, if Tahm Kench uses his Tongue Lash Q, if Alistar does his combo, you want to be throwing auto attacks at them constantly, zoning them away from your ADC, letting him free farm, and harassing their ADC. So you just want to be making the lane as easy as possible for your ADC and making it as hard as possible for their ADC. And Zyra is just a great pick for this. You just need to be super careful about getting picked with that Alistar combo, or with that Braum leaping to a minion and killing you, or Tahm Kench running you down with Frozen Augment and Q spam.
Okay, and I would say that there are pretty tough lanes, but you can definitely take advantage of people. If you feel like you're the superior player in your elo and you are good at taking advantage of enemy laners, I would say run Zyra into these tank supports. Now, what I find is a very easy matchup for me is the Enchanter supports. They just kind of sit back, spam shields, and protect their ADC, and it is very easy to just poke them out of lane. I always recommend taking Zyra into these kind of matchups and just getting some easy kills with your high base damages early, and them being very squishy and susceptible to damage. So the only Enchanter support that sometimes can give you a little bit of trouble is Nami, just because she has high base damages early and she has a lot of sustain, so she's gonna just be healing your poke. So just be careful with that matchup. It isn't too bad because your all-ins at level 6 are going to get kills on her, but any other Enchanter I'd say is a very easy matchup. Now, the fun lane definitely would be the mage support matchups. Now, the way I look at mage supports is it's really just a battle of skill shots, with one exception is the range. So whenever I see a Zyra support on the other team, I like taking Vel'Koz into it, just because if you have the range advantage in these mage support poke matchups, it can be all the difference in winning the matchups. Now, it can be a little bit daunting to take Zyra into these three, but the amount of control you provide and the amount of damage your ult does is very effective, because you can throw everything out and then flash away before they can answer with their high impact ults and heavy damage. So I think Zyra does pretty well into these mage supports, and this again is just if you're feeling good, if you feel like you're beating most supports in your elo, I would say take Zyra into these mage matchups. But if you're a little bit more if you want to be a little bit more safe, maybe take a tank support or a pick support into the mage supports. Alright, and a couple of matchups to look out for. Zyra has a super high win rate right now against the Scion support. All you have to do is avoid their brush cheese and just poke them out from range, and you should be good. Currently, she's sitting at a 54.08% win rate against Scion supports. That is a very good matchup. So if you see that Scion, definitely lock in Zyra. Another matchup to look out for on the good side is Lux. Now, I think this is you're just a better low econ mage than Lux is. She is probably better at the high end if you're putting solo lane experience and gold on them, but you are just the queen of low econ mages, and you have such a higher impact with your ult and your CC than a Lux support. And it looks like the win rate right now for for Zyra over Lux is 53.6%. Now, on the tougher side right now, we have Taric. Is a pretty tough matchup, just because he kind of counters what you're trying to do in team fights with his ult, preventing your picks and your AoE damage with his heal spam, with his shields, and with his ult can really
Just just really deter what you're trying to do in team fights. And also he has very strong all-ins at level 1, 2, and 3, so sometimes you can get cheesed out by that. Him just grabbing a stun on you, and his high base damage with his passive auto attack damage and an ignite aftershock can usually lead to death if you're not flashing and you get hit by that stun. Another tough pick is Blitzcrank. Just 46% win rate is very poor for Zyra, so just be careful and know what you're doing against hook supports. You should be seeing these matchups a lot because people like picking them into squishy mage matchups. So there are a couple cool things you can do against Blitzcrank. You can spawn your plants to eat the hook if he's looking for a hook on you. So there are a couple things you can do against it, but I'd say if you are an inexperienced Zyra player, stay away from the Blitzcrank matchup until you kind of you get used to playing against very heavy picked supports. Alright, and that will wrap up the matchups. Alright, and that will wrap up my Zyra guide. I just want to say thank you so much for all the support recently and all the feedback you guys have been giving me and sharing some of your builds and rune setups. I've actually been trying out a couple. For example, I had someone who was recommending swaying with Proto Belt, and I tried it out on one of my old accounts, and it was a blast. So if any of you guys have something cool you're doing on Zyra and I didn't mention in the video, please feel free to comment below. I will absolutely I would love to try out your off-meta stuff. I have heard about the Frozen Augment Zyra. I haven't really tried it much, but that is one of the things I'm looking to look into. And I just wanted to say, if you guys enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. Recently hit 50 subscribers, and that was awesome. So thank you guys so much again, and as always, take it easy.